Anna Carter thought she had found love with James Holloway, a sophisticated British architect who promised her a new life in London. But James wasn't just hiding a wife and child back home, he was hiding a deadly plan. What began as a romantic escape turned into a nightmare of betrayal, deception, and a chilling attempt on her life. This is the true story of how one woman's trust nearly cost her everything, and how another woman's courage stopped a killer just in time. Anna Carter often said New York made her feel alive, but deep inside, she felt invisible. Every morning she walked the cracked sidewalks of Manhattan with her camera slung over her shoulder, hoping to catch something real, moments that reminded her people still felt things. But when the sun went down and the crowds thinned, loneliness wrapped itself around her like a second skin. She was 26, independent, yet floating through life without anyone to really anchor her. That's when she met James Holloway. It was a rainy October evening at a gallery opening in Soho. Anna had gone alone, dressed in a thrifted trench coat and red lipstick, hoping to sell one of her black and white prints. She noticed him right away. A tall man, with streaks of silver in his neatly combed hair, wearing a tailored navy suit that didn't belong in the art scene. He looked out of place, and yet he owned the room without trying. When their eyes met across the gallery floor, something shifted. He smiled with the confidence of someone who had seen the world, and Anna felt her pulse quicken. James introduced himself as an architect from London, in town for a few months on a contract. His accent was smooth and deliberate, each word laced with charm. He listened when she spoke, really listened. Not like the others. He asked about her work, her dreams, her struggles living in a city that devoured hope as quickly as it gave it. For the first time in months, Anna felt seen. She didn't question his interest. Why would she? He said he was single, said he lived alone. She believed him, because wanting it to be true made it easier. In the weeks that followed, they became inseparable. He'd meet her after shoots, take her to hidden rooftop bars, and hold her hand like it was something delicate. He made her laugh, but more importantly, he made her feel safe. At night, as she lay beside him in hotel sheets that smelled faintly of cedar and clean linen, she'd imagine a future with him. She pictured quiet breakfasts in a sunlit kitchen, a tiny apartment in London, maybe even a family. She told herself it was too soon to think that way, but still she did. James, meanwhile, played his part flawlessly. He answered every question with ease, always had a reason for leaving early or arriving late. When he looked at Anna, there was warmth in his eyes, but behind them calculation lived in silence. He studied her kindness, noted her trust, measured her vulnerability like an engineer testing the strength of a bridge. She was open, eager to love, and too inexperienced to notice the cracks. He never spoke of home. When Anna once asked if his parents were still alive, he said only, "It's complicated," and changed the subject. She didn't press. Maybe she should have. Maybe deep down she didn't want to break the illusion, because falling for James felt like finally finding someone who understood the quiet ache inside her, and she wasn't ready to lose that feeling even if it wasn't real. The Miami air was thick with heat and the scent of salt water, but Anna barely noticed. She stood barefoot on the balcony of their rented oceanfront condo, the wind playing with her hair, her heart light in a way it hadn't been in years. Below, the waves rolled in rhythm with her thoughts. Steady, hopeful, full of promise. James was inside, fixing drinks, humming a tune she didn't recognize. This, she thought, must be what it feels like when life finally says yes. He had invited her on the trip 2 weeks earlier, casually mentioning that he'd finished a stressful phase of work and needed something warm and simple, a getaway, just the two of them. Anna had said yes without hesitation. She wanted to believe this meant something more, that they were moving from hidden nights in New York hotels to something real, something lasting. The way he touched her face and whispered, "Only you," before booking the tickets had sealed her belief. But James had other thoughts. He watched her from across the room now, as she turned her face to the sun, her silhouette outlined in soft gold light. She looked peaceful, innocent, and that made everything easier. He had told her about the possibility of moving to Europe together. Let her dream. He saw how her eyes lit up when he mentioned London cafes and countryside cottages, as if she could already see herself there with him. She wasn't stupid, just trusting. And James knew how far that kind of trust could go. Anna spent the days walking with him down the shore, collecting shells like a child, laughing when the water soaked her dress. She told him about the places she'd never been, the parents she barely remembered, the photographs she still hadn't developed because she feared what truth they might hold. At night, she traced his collarbone with her fingers and whispered dreams into his chest, too soft for even herself to fully hear. But sometimes, in moments she couldn't explain, she felt a sliver of cold just beneath the warmth. Like when she caught him staring at his phone with a blank look, the screen quickly turned away, or when he seemed distant, distracted, his jaw tight after mysterious phone calls he dismissed with a kiss. She wanted to ask, but feared what the answers might destroy, so she stayed quiet. She convinced herself that maybe he was just dealing with the divorce, that he needed space, time, understanding, that love, real love, required patience. James, meanwhile, was suffocating under pressure. Claire had called twice that day, her voice filled with suspicion. His daughter had asked why Daddy doesn't come home anymore, and the unpaid loans were catching up with him. Creditors had started calling his office in London. His carefully built web was starting to shake, but Anna, she was perfect, young, unburdened, emotionally attached, and most importantly, she had savings. She had no one to notice if she disappeared. To James, she wasn't just a lover anymore. She was an exit strategy. And to Anna, James wasn't just a man. He was her beginning. Anna arrived in London with her heart brimming and her hands trembling. The sky above Heathrow was heavy with grey clouds, but to her, it felt like a fresh beginning. The air was different, cooler, foreign, full of promise. As she clutched her passport and looked around the bustling terminal, she imagined James waiting just beyond the crowd, arms open, ready to begin the life they had spoken of on warm Miami nights. This was everything she had hoped for. A new country, a new chapter, a man who had chosen her. But James wasn't there. He texted an hour after her plane landed, claiming a last-minute meeting had pulled him away. His tone was apologetic, sweet, reassuring. He had booked a car for her, and a temporary place in Brighton, a cozy little spot by the sea, he said, just for a week or two until their real home was ready. Anna told herself not to overthink it. After all, she'd left behind everything in New York to be with him. Trusting him now was the only option she had left. Brighton was beautiful, but lonely. The rental was small and neat, with cream walls and cold floors, and an empty fridge. James visited twice in the first week, bringing groceries and soft kisses. But he never stayed long, always in a rush, always checking his watch. Meetings in the city, he would say. Things I need to wrap up before we can really begin. He made promises with such ease, it was hard to question them. Anna wandered the streets alone, camera in hand, snapping pictures of fog-covered piers and crumbling Victorian buildings. She tried to see it all as an adventure, a temporary delay before their future unfolded. But the space between his visits began to stretch. 2 days became 5, 5 became a week. And when he did appear, he seemed restless, distant, like he was carrying something heavy he wouldn't put down. Late one night, Anna lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. It was James, sending a photo of his desk, papers scattered, a whiskey glass in the corner. Working late, miss you, soon. She stared at the message for a long time, something inside her slowly beginning to shift. It wasn't suspicion, not quite, more like the echo of something unspoken, a quiet warning rising in her gut. She began Googling his firm in London. Nothing specific came up about him. No social media, no press, no official company photos, just vague listings and old architecture blog mentions. It didn't match the picture he had painted. She wanted to ask, to confront him. But what if she was wrong? What if this was just insecurity, the residue of being on unfamiliar ground. Meanwhile, James was unraveling. Claire had called again, her tone now sharp and accusing. His bank accounts were thinning. The creditors weren't just calling anymore, they were threatening court. He was cornered, drowning in lies, and Anna, quiet and hopeful in Brighton, was beginning to look less like a lover and more like an opportunity. But she didn't know that yet. She still believed in him, still clung to the idea that this waiting was temporary, that love, real love, sometimes took patience. She had no idea just how dangerous that patience would become. Claire Holloway sat at the kitchen table of their London townhouse, staring at the same unread text message, for the third time that morning. "I'll be working late again. Don't wait up." It had become James's signature line, sent with clockwork regularity. She used to believe it. Now, she barely flinched. The words had lost all warmth, just hollow letters strung together to buy him another night away from the life he used to want. Their daughter Sophie played in the living room with her stuffed animals, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mother's chest. Claire's coffee had gone cold in her hands, but she didn't care. She was too busy watching James's digital footprint unravel in front of her. The private investigator had delivered his first findings the night before. Brighton, an Airbnb, and a name she had never heard before, Anna Carter. Claire had typed it into every search engine she could find. The results made her hands shake. Photos. Vacation pictures. A smiling James with his arm around a woman half his age, laughing under Miami skies. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was the ease of it. How convincingly he had played the doting father and husband in one life, while whispering promises to another woman in a different country. Claire felt something in her chest crack, not from heartbreak, but from fury. She wasn't just a wife scorned, she was a woman being erased. Claire didn't confront James immediately. She knew him too well. He would lie, twist, deflect. So she stayed quiet, collected evidence, and began to study his pattern. That's when she stumbled onto something far more terrifying. On one of James's shared financial accounts, she noticed a large insurance policy. A new one, recently filed. The beneficiary was James, the insured Anna Carter. It made no sense, until it did. A chilling thought began to form in her mind. This wasn't about love or lust anymore. James was desperate, drowning in debt, lying to two women, losing control of the story he had written for himself. Anna wasn't just a mistress, she was his exit plan. Claire could feel it in her bones, and she wasn't going to wait for another tragedy to unfold. She took her findings to the police. At first, they hesitated. Suspicion wasn't enough. But once the insurance company confirmed the policy and the documents naming James as the sole recipient, the tone shifted. Now it wasn't just a cheating husband, it was a potential predator preparing to profit from someone's death. Claire didn't sleep that night. She lay awake beside the empty space James used to fill, wondering how many parts of her life had been a lie. She looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall and felt a sharp, protective rage rise through her. James had chosen destruction, but Claire had chosen to fight. She wasn't going to let Anna disappear, and she wasn't going to let James get away with murder. The invitation came in a gentle text, soft and harmless. "Let's escape for the weekend, just you and me. I've found a lovely place in the countryside. We need this." Anna read the message 3 times before her breath settled. It had been weeks since she'd seen James for more than a fleeting hour. Her heart ached for closeness, for clarity. Maybe this was it. Maybe the moment he would finally tell her the divorce was done, that they could begin again without shadows. She replied with a simple yes. They drove out of Brighton under a pale sky, past hedges and rolling hills that blurred like watercolor through the car window. Anna watched James's hands on the steering wheel. She still loved the way his fingers moved with control, always steady, but something about him felt quieter now. Not gentle, guarded. His eyes barely met hers. When she asked about the inn, he just smiled faintly and said, "It's peaceful. You'll love it." The inn was tucked away on a country road, surrounded by bare trees and long grass flattened by wind. Inside, the room was quaint, stone fireplace, creaking floorboards, thick red curtains. James poured them wine as Anna explored the space, her suitcase still unopened. She caught herself in the mirror once and paused. There were shadows under her eyes, subtle, but new. She looked older than she remembered. Not tired, but weathered. As if the waiting, the wondering, had started to etch itself into her skin. James handed her a glass. His smile was soft, almost sorrowful. "To us," he said, raising his drink. Anna clinked her glass against his, a little hesitantly. The wine was sweeter than she liked. Heavy, it left a strange warmth at the back of her throat. The minutes blurred after that. Her limbs felt heavier, as if her bones were sinking into her body. Her vision dulled around the edges and her breath slowed. Something was wrong. She tried to speak, but her mouth wouldn't shape the word. James was saying something quiet, measured, but it sounded far away, like a voice underwater. She saw him reach for her glass, then her phone, then her bag. Her heartbeat thudded like a drum, echoing in an empty hallway. She wasn't asleep, she was slipping. In those hazy moments, Anna's thoughts clung to something strange, not fear but confusion. Why? Why would the man who held her with such tenderness now look at her with such hollow focus? She tried to move her fingers. Nothing. She felt her body lifted, arms limp at her sides, as James carried her toward the door. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. Somewhere in the distance, tires crunched gravel. Then came a flash of blue lights. Voices shouting. James froze. Two officers emerged from the darkness, guns raised, orders slicing through the night like knives. Within seconds, James was pinned to the ground, handcuffed, shouting protests she could barely comprehend. Anna lay motionless in the back seat of his car, her eyes fluttering open just enough to see the stores above. She was still alive, but only just. The courtroom was silent as Anna stepped into the witness stand, the weight of every memory pressing down on her shoulders. The air inside was sterile and cold, but her hands were damp with heat sweat, born of fear, fury, and something deeper, betrayal. She could feel the eyes of the jury, the journalists, the curious strangers, all of them watching her. But she kept her gaze forward, never turning toward the man sitting across the room. James Holloway. Her former lover, her almost killer. He looked different now. No longer the polished, charming man in tailored suits. His hair was uncombed, his jaw lined with stubble, his expression unreadable. Not guilt, not remorse, just emptiness. She wondered if he ever loved her, or if she had just been a pawn, a soft-hearted girl with a camera and a dream, used and nearly discarded. The prosecutor's voice broke through her thoughts, gentle, measured, asking about the first day they met, the trip to Miami, the weeks in Brighton, the wine, the dizziness, the final moments before everything went dark. As Anna spoke, her voice wavered at first, but grew steadier with each word. She described the feeling of slipping out of her own body, the coldness in his eyes, the terrifying realization that she wasn't meant to wake up. James never looked at her, not once. Claire sat just behind the prosecution bench, hands clenched together, her face pale but firm. Anna had only spoken to her once before the trial, a quiet conversation in a hospital room, just days after the arrest. There had been no drama, no resentment, just two women standing in the rubble of the same man's lies. Claire had saved her life. Anna didn't know how to thank her. There weren't words for that. When the verdict came, it was almost anticlimactic. The judge read the sentence in a steady voice. 28 years in prison without the possibility of early release. James blinked once. No reaction, no outburst, just silence. As if he knew this was coming, and he had already resigned himself to it. Anna exhaled, but she didn't feel victorious. There was no peace in seeing him led away in handcuffs. only a strange, aching numbness. Justice had been served, yes, but the damage remained. She had loved someone who had planned her death, and that truth would always live inside her. Months passed. Seasons changed. Anna returned to New York, not as the same woman who had left. She didn't speak of James. She deleted the old photos, blocked his name, buried the memories like unprocessed film in a dusty drawer. But the scars stayed, not on her skin, but in the way she hesitated before trusting a voice, a hand, a promise. She started a photography project called Trust Me, a series of portraits capturing survivors of deception, loss, emotional violence. Each shot raw, grainy, unfiltered, just like the truth she had learned the hardest way. Claire, meanwhile, moved to the coast with Sophie. She left behind the name Holloway like it was a stain. She began speaking at shelters, warning women about the dangers that can hide behind perfect smiles. Not all monsters live in the shadows. Some wear suits and say they love you. Anna and Claire didn't stay in touch, but they carried a quiet, shared understanding. 2 lives, both shattered, both saved, and one man locked away who would never hurt another woman again.